Hi there, and welcome to Ian's Engage channel. I'm Ian. In previous videos I showed how I'd extended the baseboard by a few inches to avoid a problem that would have left foam hanging unsupported in mid-air. In this video I'm going to make some actual progress on my build. After what seems like months of getting nothing done fast, by the end of this video I shall have both lower and upper levels of foam installed on my baseboard. If you've been following my progress, you'll know that I was in two minds on whether to implement Shelfington on more than one level at all, but I'd finally decided that I'd have the track running between two levels. The lower level will be at 40mm, which was a height chosen so the foam can easily accommodate the servo motors that I intend to use to operate the points. The upper level will be at 60mm, which was chosen to make the gradients easy to achieve over the short distances I had to work with. I also intended to dig into the foam for more depth and to build it up for more height where I didn't have track work, to stop the layout looking too flat. Anyway, once the running heights were decided, it allowed me to re-examine the track plan, and I decided that I wanted to change it, again, to make the installation of the foam and the eventual scenic elements a bit easier. Up until the last couple of weeks I'd been working with version 35 of the track plan, which is currently on screen. However, I was quite concerned about the separation between the outer loop of track and the track leading off the baseboard towards Sill Harbour. These would be at different levels, and I wanted to ensure that there was plenty of space between the tracks to still allow trains to run around the outer loop without fouling the higher level. So, to address this concern, I updated the plan to version 36, and have moved the loops further to the right to allow for better separation. I've also redesigned Ledgetown Quarry area and its marshalling yard to be much simpler to allow more space for scenic elements to be created. However, let's not get sidetracked. The main subject of this video is how I'm going to split the two levels. If we concentrate on the baseboard I've built so far, I've added a shaded area to the plan that approximates where the foam will be built up to 60mm, and for the time being everything else on the plan will be at 40mm. So first of all, I decided that it made sense to ensure that the whole of the baseboard was covered in 40mm of foam. The majority of the baseboard was already at this level, the exception being the area where Shelfington goods yard will be. Of course, as this area had been left empty for a few weeks, it had turned into a shelf again, so removing the contents was my first task. There was definitely a feeling of déjà vu as I removed the clutter from this area. Now, for historical reasons, this area of the layout had varying thicknesses of foam already glued in place, so getting everything levelled off would be a great start. Pieces of 30mm, 20mm and 10mm foam were used to ensure everything was brought up to the same level, and met up with the existing layers of foam on the main 6-foot baseboard. This process involved several iterations of cutting foam to size, applying glue to the area where the foam would be placed, and then clamping or weighing the foam down until the glue had gone off. If there were any uneven areas at the joins, then these were sanded level and the dust vacuumed away. Eventually I ended up with a level playing field, so to speak, and I could go ahead and begin building up the foam to the 60mm level. Ooh, now this was an exciting part of the build, as this is where Shelfington railway station will eventually be situated on the upper level. Oh, hang on, I actually hadn't finished with the lower level yet, as I needed to add one final piece of 10mm foam, but hadn't been able to do that until the piece of foam for Shelfington railway station was in place. Building up the foam was like making a giant three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle, with one piece falling into place only after another piece had been fitted. So once that area had been completed, I needed to be careful how I added the remaining upper level of foam, as I was wary about situating it in the wrong place. To allay my fears, I decided to go back to the track plan and print it out. Unfortunately, this was trickier than it should have been, as my trusty Canon printer had finally decided to die after about a decade's worth of service. However, being a computer geeky type of guy, I happened to have a spare printer hanging around in storage, which, after a bit of tinkering, did a great job of printing out the required pages of the track plan. I use Rail Modeler Pro as my track design software, and you may remember that once printed out, in order to join the pages of the track plan together, they needed to be trimmed. It was a real pain in the backside having to do this, but I eventually got on with marking the top and right hand edges of each page I was going to trim, and then I used my utility knife to make the cut. At this time I only trimmed the pages of the plan that contained track that would be on the upper level. So, once this had been completed, I could arrange them on the surface of the foam, right? Well, no. Before I could do that, I needed to remove the test track. The test track had only been a temporary measure, but it had served me well over the last couple of months, and had allowed me to play trains once in a while, and had also allowed me to complete a couple of local reviews. Hopefully, it wouldn't be too long before I had something similar back in action, as it was always nice being able to run trains while in the process of building the layout. Anyway, once the test track was removed, I took the opportunity to glue the foam it had been laid on to the layer underneath. It had only been pinned down until now, so gluing it meant that I was happy with its positioning. I weighted the foam panels down using some really useful boxes, which were definitely living up to their name, while I waited for the glue to dry. Once dry, I could start adding more 20mm thick foam sheets. I'd made up some 60mm tall spaces to fill the gap where the scenic breakboard would be, which allowed me to push the 20mm thick foam sheets as far back as they needed to go without breaching the scenic breakboard gap. Once the larger sheets were pinned in place, it finally allowed me to pin the printout I'd prepared earlier on top of them. Once the printout was in place, it let me visualize where the landscape would fall away towards the lower level. This in turn allowed me to mark the printout using a pencil. Whilst I did this, I was trying to think about infrastructure details. I needed space for a road, maybe a small car park and a building or two, and of course a platform for Mantlethorpe Station. I didn't need to be too precise with my markings, as long as I kept away from where the track would be. Next I used a craft knife to cut the sheets where I'd marked them. Then I used a Sharpie pen to mark the foam along the edge where I'd cut the track plan. I then used a utility knife to cut the foam along the marked edge, which gave me pieces of foam that were the correct shape, although I don't seem to have any footage of me doing that. It was too cold to work in the garage, so I created a temporary workbench in my living room, where I was under the watchful eye of my tropical fish. Back at the layout, I was only going to pin these top-level pieces to the base for the time being, so that they could be easily removed should modification be required in the future. Hopefully that won't be necessary, but, as you know, I like to remain cautious. Finally, I decided to tidy up the foam along the edge of the baseboard, and sanded out any uneven edges so that they were level with the plywood fascia. I would eventually cover this area with some sort of trim, but hadn't yet decided exactly what I'd use. Okay, so that's about it for now. This was a bit longer than my usual updates, but I feel that I've made quite a big step forward with the build, so thought it was worth showing all of the steps that helped me progress the three-dimensional foam jigsaw puzzle that is effectively my baseboard. Before I commit to gluing the top pieces of foam in place, I've got a couple of experiments in mind that I want to try. So, watch this space. That just leaves me to say that if you've got any hints, tips, useful tools or techniques to pass on to a beginner in Engage modelling, or if you simply want to say hello, then please do so in the comments section. Anything and everything you've got to say will be greatly appreciated. In the meantime, thanks ever so much for watching. Hopefully I'll have another update on my progress soon. Bye.